Okay, cool. Great. Right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our first committee meeting for sustainability and resilience for the new year. We hope to have many, many more. I'm calling this meeting at 6:03 on February 14, 2024. And with us, quick roll call, we have Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Shanahan, Councilmember Dunn, Councilmember Goldstein. And if anyone comes in, we will acknowledge them. So moving on to public participation. Ms. O'Leary, is there anyone in the public that would like to speak? And before we get to that, I just want to make it clear for the record that please state your first name, last name, address, and you have 3 minutes to speak on an item pertaining to the agenda. And all this other nonsense about, hatred, any sexual explicit comments, or anything of that nature you will be immediately kicked out. So having said that, let's see if anyone is available to speak. Oh, I think you're muted.
There is one member of the public who has their hand raised.
Okay, great. Hi, Ms. Lortelli, can you hear us?
Yes, I hope you can hear me.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so
Thank
hi,
you. Good evening.
welcome. And
Welcome. Happy Valentine's Day all. For the record, my name is Diane Lauricella, 21 Little Fox Lane. Tonight, as I have said in the past, I'm very enthusiastic about the existence of this ad hoc committee, council committee right now. I look forward to listening to the agenda items, and I just wanted to speak on the item relating to the climate action plan. As some of you know, part of the work I do professionally is to advise clients how to green up their businesses or their neighborhood. What I'm looking forward to, I wanted to inform this committee, many of you are new, is that WestCog currently is also doing a climate action plan. And I'm hoping that instead of just doing our own on our own, that we at least utilize the parts that they come up with. They have consultants also working with them. I also wanted to say that there are many templates that I would expect, and I'm hoping that the redevelopment agency and consultants are using. Something that I gave the mayor and some members of the previous council was Bridgeport's Be Green 2030. One word, Be Green 2030, started by former Mayor Bill Finch, who was ahead of his time before this became so popular. So lastly, I just wanted to say that today's a day to celebrate, love. And we love the green. We love the potential of our city becoming greener, if not the greenest city. We're not there yet, and we're working on it. But I want this committee to seriously consider allowing those of us that were there before this became popular to be included in the planning phases in a meaningful way, not just when you have a public hearing, but actually speaking with you all individually offline in order to help this ad hoc committee do their work. And I thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing Mr. Thompson, as well as your CAP or the Climate Action Plan. But what I'm concerned about is, Mr. Chairman, you have been very gracious, but predecessor chair I'm not sure that they are speaking with some of us that for years have given information. I know several people that aren't on this call that just got a little disappointed because they've given information to you all.
I'm sorry, Ms. Lortelli, I'll give you 30 seconds left.
Thank you. I'll wrap
way
up.
beyond. Yep.
Thank you, including myself. So we hope that residents that mean well will be included at every step of the way. So with that, have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lortelli. Ms. O'Leary, anyone else in the public that?
No,
Nope. Okay.
no one else.
All right, so moving on, let's see, let's see, acceptance of the approval minutes for the special meeting on October 16th, 2023. Do I have a motion to accept those meetings? Thank you, Councilman Goldstein. Everyone in favor of accepting the meetings? Okay, thank you, everyone. 2, 3, 4. Any abstentions? Okay, that's done. Thank you. Okay,
John,
so
did you raise your hand?
I did not. I should have. I'm supposed
No,
to,
you
right?
shouldn't have, because
Oh,
that
no,
was
no, I
before
didn't. I
you were
didn't.
elected. Okay.
Okay,
just
yeah,
checking.
yeah. Oh, no, no.
Because you said 4. There are only 3 of us, I think, who were on, who were also on the council.
Oh,
So,
okay.
okay.
So,
So
all right.
it's
Yeah,
just
no,
3.
thanks for. Okay,
That's why I
perfect.
abstained. I assume that's what we're supposed to do. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you for that correction. All right. So, first item on the agenda is a presentation by Sustainable Streets. Today we have with us Tanner Thompson. Hi, Tanner. He will be giving just a short information presentation on what Sustainable Streets is, what they advocate for, and how it's beneficial to our city and the trajectory that we are on. So, with further ado, Ms. O'Leary, can you does Tanner have permission to speak? And does he? Okay, great. So, Tanner, welcome, and you may get started.
Thanks, Johan. You can all see this presentation, right?
Yes, can everyone see it? Okay, perfect.
Excellent. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invite, Johan, to, or I should say, Council Member Lopez, or Chair Lopez, for inviting me to give this presentation. Most of you probably know me as the Chair of the Bike Walk Commission. It's probably worth making it clear that tonight I'm speaking on behalf of Sustainable Streets Norwalk, a group that I'm heavily involved in, and that is a friend and frequent partner of the Bike Walk Commission. But I do not represent the Bike Walk Commission tonight, although a lot of what I'm going to talk about here has been informed by the experiences that I've had as the chair. And I think Johan even asked me to say a little bit about the way that Sustainable Streets has worked with the city and with different departments in the city, and I can cover that a little bit more. But the short answer is that we work hand in hand with the Bike Walk Commission, facilitated obviously because we have some membership in common. But Sustainable Streets is entirely independent of the city government. It's more grassroots, and the Bike Walk Commission is very much part of the city government. But obviously we have a great working relationship between the two groups. So my presentation tonight is called Building a Sustainable Norwalk. I'm going to attempt to be brief, but also comprehensive. And I hope that the preparation I've put in will allow me to do both of those. So the 3 things I want to try and cover, an introduction to our group and why we exist, an overview of the things that are currently going on in the city that we support and that we want to see more of, and then opportunities. I've tried to be as concrete as possible, things that the council could do, like real actions the council could take in 2024 to work on the priorities that we hold. So first, we are a group of Norwalk residents, and we care about 5 focus areas: walking, biking, public transportation, housing options, and urban spaces or urban greenery. As you can see, we hang out a lot. We ride the bus together, we eat together, we ride the train together, we bike a lot together.
Yeah, you bike with me.
We have biked with you. I don't know if
I think that's me right down there. I'm gonna take credit for this.
Yeah, in the green shirt, I think that's you. And a couple of us even got to drive a train once together. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten the whole group out to drive a train yet, but definitely on the bucket list. Anyway, I hope that you can all see the connections between these different categories, but ultimately we're kind of united by this vision of a future where Norwalk is less reliant on cars, especially cars for transportation. Now, if you're wondering why do we care so much about that, that's what this section of the presentation is about. Broadly, we see our society's reliance on automobiles as we use the term car dependency. That what we're pushing back on is not the individual use of a car, but the fact that our society in so many dimensions has become over-reliant and dependent on cars at the exclusion of other more sustainable solutions. I think that this committee is organized mostly around the idea of environmental sustainability, but I want to bring 3 different angles of sustainability to the conversation, environmental as well as fiscal sustainability and societal or social sustainability. The first one is probably the most obvious. We want to see more environmental sustainability because of lots of different environmental impacts that car dependency has. There's the most obvious one, the carbon emissions. I think transportation makes up something like 40% of the carbon footprint of the United States, and that varies by region. But it's however you slice it, it's either the number one or number two biggest category in our collective carbon footprint. On top of that, though, there's a lot of other environmental impacts that sometimes get overlooked because of the massive CO2 impact, and those are the other tailpipe emissions from gas-powered cars. We're going to be getting a little bit better at that with the transition to EVs. Unfortunately, the rest of what's going on, we won't be getting very much better at. Microplastics has only recently been identified as a massive source of pollution from cars. And those are mostly from brakes and tires, something that EVs, are not going to be any better at than gas-powered cars. And in some ways, because they're heavier, will be even worse. Those microplastics mostly end up in our water. And in Norwalk, being so close to the Sound, I think that's as relevant as anywhere. There's also the noise pollution. My favorite succinct way to express this is that it's not really cities that are loud, it's cars that are loud. And when you go to cities that have really nailed the transition past car dependency, you realize that how true that is. That cities, places where people live in close proximity to each other, don't have to be loud. And EVs are definitely quieter, and especially at low speeds, they're much quieter. But at high speeds, most of the noise that you get from the highway is tire noise, not engine noise. So unfortunately, EVs aren't going to fix that either. And then there's the impermeable surface, which is not a result of cars per se, but of the infrastructure required for them. We have all this asphalt in Norwalk, especially in floodplains, and it prevents us from being resilient to flooding events. So moving on from environmental sustainability, there's the fiscal angle. For individuals, cars represent a huge source of expenditure. It's one of the driving forces behind the high cost of living in this part of the country. Right here, this little graphic illustrates all the different parts of the true cost of car ownership, which goes far beyond the car payment or the gas. But then on the governmental side, there is the high cost of car infrastructure. I've got right here the schematic of the proposed scaled down 715, or the Merit 7 interchange. This has been massively scaled down from some of the earlier concepts, and is now we're going to get it for the low price of $200 million. Previously, it was about $400 million with the larger scope. Obviously, that's not coming out of the city of Norwalk's bank account, but the taxpayers are paying for it at some level. And this is just one interchange. The cost to our society of building and maintaining car infrastructure is incredibly expensive and is often ignored, especially in comparisons with, say, public transportation projects, which often are criticized for not turning a profit, but we never ask about, like, does the Merritt Parkway turn a profit? And then there's the sustainability question of, like, the development pattern that we have embraced for the last 50 to 70 years that is oriented around automobile transportation is quite fiscally unsustainable. If you want to learn more about this, I would highly suggest the work of a group called Strong Towns. There's a book called Strong Towns that was kind of the founding document, and they've done a lot of work, including this graphic right here, which looks at the county where St. Paul, Minnesota is. And the graph, the bars show the taxable value per acre, like essentially the revenue per acre. And you can see that it's massive in the downtown and in the more urbanized area, and in the suburbs, it's very, very small. And essentially the central argument of this group, Strong Towns, is that this sprawling suburban development pattern in the long run does not pay for itself, because the government expenditure required to maintain the infrastructure for that development pattern is not completely met by the property taxes that are collected on that land. And that the opposite is true in places where, like, nominally the costs are higher for infrastructure, but the tax revenue is so much higher that it actually is it works out, it pencils out positively as opposed to negatively. So the last category is societal sustainability. This is maybe the hardest to measure, but arguably also the the most overlooked. When we live in a society where we have to drive everywhere, we end up with a lot of inactivity, which in part leads to obesity. Also, living next to a freeway has been linked to higher rates of asthma in children, and living next to a highway because of the road noise specifically has been linked to increased levels of dementia in older adults. There's also the social isolation aspect. If you have to drive everywhere, you're less likely to see your neighbors and form, connections, even informal connections with your neighbors. This reminds me, if any of you are familiar with Jane Jacobs, the famous urbanist who wrote kind of the seminal work, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. She talks about eyes on the street and how even if there's a lot of people on your street that you don't know, if you know them well enough to know that they don't have malicious intent, then they keep you safe and you keep them safe just by having eyes on the street. But if nobody's out walking, you don't really have that. The last one is the housing costs, which obviously is a fiscal thing, but the impact of that on our society is that, and we see this in Norwalk with our rising housing costs, that populations that can least afford to live here are moving out. Some populations that grew up here in Norwalk, also poorer populations and younger generations are losing out on the ability to build equity and intergenerational wealth because of the increased costs of housing and of transportation. And I don't really have a better place in the presentation to mention this, so I'll just point out explicitly the link there between housing and transportation. Transportation and housing are almost the same issue because so much of transportation depends on where you live and where the things that you want to get to can be built and where they can't be built, which is why, as you may have noticed, we try to get very involved in the zoning reform process and had a few wins there. But we believe that if we embrace alternative transportation methods, that can lower some of the constraints on building housing, ultimately allowing us to add housing to the housing supply and bring down the market price of market rate housing. So without further ado, section 2, here's what's currently going on. I think that I hope that you all are familiar with some of these. I'm going to talk both about things that are going on in the city that we're not leading, and also talk about some things that we've done, that we've kind of driven. Complete Streets is number 1, and I hope that you're all excited about Complete Streets. I'm certainly excited about it. It's going to set, I won't spend a ton of time on this because I think you're all familiar, but I want to underscore how pivotal it is for making our streets more friendly for alternative transportation, for walking, for biking, and for public transit. So I can obviously answer more questions about that after the presentation, but I'll move on from there because I think you're all familiar. What you may not be as familiar with is this project that is almost as complex and large in scope as Complete Streets, but has gotten a lot less airtime, and that is the Transit District's Comprehensive Operational Analysis. This is like a 14-month project that the Transit District has hired a consultant. They've actually hired one of the best public transit consultants in the nation. They're called Nelson Nygaard, and they are doing a comprehensive look at all of the operational aspects of Norwalk Transit District, every bus line, the scheduling, the routing, the allocation of vehicles and employees, and depending on what they find, it could lead and likely will lead to a pretty fundamental restructuring of the bus network. I think from what I've gathered, both firsthand and talking to people, I think that the bus system has long been overlooked in Norwalk. And I know that the network has not been redesigned in 30 or 40 years, which is why this project is so important and so overdue. As you can see on this timeline here, we are about a third of the way into it here. The State of the System report actually was just released, like the formal document was just released maybe a month ago. It's a 60-page document. I've read it. I don't expect you all to read it, but one of the biggest takeaways is this map that's here on the right, which is the map of composite demand. This is kind of their best estimate of like, where do people live who are likely to take transit? And one of the big takeaways is that the existing service that we have in Norwalk geographically is quite aligned with where people are likely to ride. The problem is that the bus just doesn't come very often. The best routes in the city come every 20 minutes, and that's only on weekdays. On Saturdays, I don't think anything comes. Maybe one line comes every 20 minutes. On Sundays and at evenings, we have almost no service. We have about 2 lines that run, and they run like half-hourly at best. So what we're hoping is that in doing this reanalysis, that we can reallocate resources, maybe streamline, combine some routes, and get better frequencies, maybe 10-minute service on some of these routes. As you can see, lots of neighborhoods in Norwalk were found to have a composite demand that would support 10-minute service. And really the difference between 20-minute service and 10-minute service is huge because it affords people a flexibility that's much more comparable to owning a car, right? If you own a car, you can go out and use it as soon as you need to at the drop of a hat. But if the bus only comes every 20 minutes, or if the bus only comes every hour, which is so common in Norwalk, like that's just not an option, and people won't really consider it unless they have no other choice. There's other developments with NTD as well. We've been asking for a long time and supporting NTD in finding a digital payment solution, and they're actually beta testing it right now, a way that you can buy a bus ticket on your phone instead of having to have cash or a bus token on you to use the bus. We're also working with them to try and make the system more user-friendly, to have better signage. We did, and I'll come back to it in a minute, but we did a full inventory of all the bus stops in the city and presented the data to them. And the consultant that's working on this project has actually used it in some of their analysis, which is pretty cool. But I'm happy to answer more questions about that. But to keep moving, I mentioned the bus stop inventory. Back in November, we did a walk audit on Wall Street where we visited a bunch of different places on Wall Street and highlighted the value of the existing transportation infrastructure, such as the bus hub, as well as the opportunities to add housing in that transit-rich, walkable part of town. The next one is the bicycle-friendly communities application. This was a project of the Bike Walk Commission, supported by members of Sustainable Streets. We filled out the very long application, and we were recognized just last week with an honorable mention, meaning that we have made progress, but that we still have a lot of work to do to become truly a bicycle-friendly community. We've also spoken at hearings. We spoke at a hearing in favor of making room for the Norwalk River Valley Trail in the 715 interchange project, which I just showed the map of a few slides ago. And then we also, in the zoning rewrite process, we spoke in favor of eliminating parking requirements in the downtown zone. I think some of you may be familiar with our support for that and the arguments we made in favor of that. It's a somewhat, until recently, it's a policy dynamic that's been kind of ignored and unsexy and has only recently entered the public discourse. So I'm happy to answer more questions about that on a policy level. In 2024, we've come up with, I think I have 10 things here. I've created slides for 6 of them that I feel like are the most important and the most actionable. And number 1 is East Avenue. When I talk to people around town about like, where do you wish that you could walk or bike and feel like you can't? And the answer overwhelmingly is East Avenue. As you probably know, last year in the budget process, TMP requested $750,000 to do a comprehensive study and design for East Avenue. This includes the area around the Green, which historically was the community center of Norwalk, and now is much harder to use as a walkable center of town because there's a 4-lane highway essentially running next to it. Obviously, that road needs to support a lot of car traffic, but we think that it could be done in a way that is has a lower footprint, that produces less noise pollution, and that ultimately is much more human scale and allows people to walk and bike safely along it. One more anecdote there. I talked to a woman who lives near East Avenue, near City Hall, who tells me that she does not even walk on the sidewalk because she feels that it's so unsafe, and that when she needs to walk along East Avenue, she cuts through the parking lots behind the buildings on the east side, which was just like eye-opening to me. So what the council can do, I know the council is not the only actor here in the budget process, but whatever you can do to make sure that the remaining $450,000 that TMP has requested to match the $300,000 that they were given last year in the budget. Anything you can do there would be helpful, because as I talk to TMP, they're very convinced and very sure that this path that they have identified of doing this comprehensive study and design, even though it's expensive up front, that's the right path forward. And I trust them because I'm not a professional and they are. So I would ask that we work with them to get them that money so that they can work on that. The next one is the East Coast Greenway. This is a project that is a little bit newer. It started decades ago with a vision for a dedicated walking and biking path that stretches from Key West, Florida to the top of Maine. And it's like 40% done along the East Coast, but in Fairfield County, it's 0% done. It's only a line on the map. It's only just an on-street route. But a couple years ago, advocates in Stamford and Greenwich started working on it and got the support of the mayor in Stamford and the first selectman in Greenwich. And they put in a grant application last year and won $270,000 from this grant program from Connecticut Deep. And they are now hiring a consultant to do to make a design for a section of the East Coast Greenway that bridges the gap between Greenwich and Stamford. I've been looking for ways for us to build on that momentum. I've been talking to a lot of people, both elected officials and city employees, trying to, and this I guess is strictly on behalf of the Bike Walk Commission. I've been trying to find a way for the Bike Walk Commission to drive an effort to apply for this grant. Learning a lot about the process of grant applications. It's more complex than I originally bargained for. I'm still hoping that we can make this deadline for the same grant program this year because it's incredibly well suited to what we're doing and what our vision is here. The deadline is March 11th, and I don't know that we're going to make it. But if you're interested in working with me on that, I would love to chat with you more. This on the right, this is actually an AI generated rendering that one of my friends who's familiar with the latest in AI tools made for me. But this is, something that we might see in South Norwalk on the way to Rowayton. I already brought it up once. I just want to underscore that one of the most important things the council can do this year is to pass complete streets. This means the design guide and the ordinance, although I think the Common Council specifically has the most impact, the most control over whether the ordinance gets passed. Again, I think you're all familiar with this, but I'm happy to answer questions after the presentation if there's anything that's unclear about this process and how you all are involved in it. This one is something that has only kind of recently come to my attention, and I've started a couple conversations around it, but I want to put it on your radar now. Under Connecticut law, every municipality has a local traffic authority, an LTA, and in most of the smaller towns, the traffic authority is just the town manager. In some of the bigger cities, including Norwalk, the traffic authority is the police commission. The police commission has all the responsibilities and authority of the local traffic authority. The reason this is important is because the traffic authority is the ultimate arbiter of the public right-of-way. Anything that we want to do, either temporary or permanently, with the public right-of-way has to go through the traffic authority. And this is especially important with complete streets, because complete streets will involve a lot of changes to the public right-of-way for the better. Like I said, right now it's the police commission. The police commission was recently expanded to 5 members, but I haven't seen any evidence that the traffic authority has been similarly expanded to 5 members, even though in the city code, in our it's a city ordinance that established this relationship, this definition of the traffic authority. And based on my reading of the law, I am not a lawyer, but it would seem that the traffic authority should also be expanded because it is defined as the police commission. So I have 3 proposals here, short, medium, and long term. That in the short term, I think that it may just require an update to the website and making sure that everybody understands the existing law that we have on the books that should, as far as I understand, mean that the traffic authority has the same membership as the police commission. Recently, one of the 2 new vacancies on the police commission was filled, and so I would expect that new person, I think it's Nate Sumter, is that his name?
Yeah, it's Nate.
So based on my understanding, he should now be a member of the traffic authority as well, because he's a member of the police commission. And that also means that there would be a vacancy. So my medium-term proposal is that vacancy on the police commission, which is also the traffic authority, should be filled by somebody who represents or can speak from the perspective of a non-driving street user. Our long-term vision here is, and really it's not even that long-term, as currently defined, the traffic authority can be also thought of as the streets authority. And because we are trying to move toward this conception of streets for all users, or complete streets, you can think of it as a complete streets authority. So in the long term, it might make sense to separate the police commission from the traffic authority. I'm still waiting on the draft of the ordinance that the Complete Streets consultant is coming up with, but they have mentioned that one of the things they're considering including in that ordinance is the creation of a Complete Streets commission or a Complete Streets Advisory Commission. Again, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an elected official, but it might make sense. And certainly worth talking about. Could that Complete Streets Commission do the job of the traffic authority and do a better job of being representative of residents and of all street users, of pedestrians, of cyclists, of scooter riders, of joggers, of wheelchair users, of transit riders, and of course of drivers, and of the police, because the police definitely need to be represented in any conversation about how we use our streets. But right now, as it stands, I think that representation is not there on the traffic authority. So again, happy to take questions about that. I'm almost at the end. Parking enforcement. This is another conversation that seems to have come front and center recently. I took every single one of these pictures, and this is not even half of the pictures that I have of cars that are parked on the sidewalk. I started taking these pictures a couple years ago after a conversation with the chief of police, where I asked about parking on the sidewalk and what could be done about it. And his answer was, if you see somebody parked on the sidewalk, report it through our app. So I've done that, and I've done a lot of it. And I've gotten a little bit tired, and I think that at this point it's not really sustainable, speaking of sustainability, to expect that parking enforcement is powered principally by individuals like me constantly taking photos. I think Councilmember Young pointed out in some recent meeting that the police have a lot of other priorities, bigger fish to fry, and I wouldn't argue with that. And I think Jim Travers of TMP has recently brought up the idea of moving the responsibility for parking enforcement from the police department to the parking authority. And I think that there is a lot of value in that idea, and that at the very least should be a public conversation that we have. I'm inclined to think that it's the right idea, but we won't know until we have the conversation. We should be having that conversation. I hope you can see what kind of impact this has on people walking. If the car is parked blocking the sidewalk, sometimes it's not so flagrant and you can get around, but sometimes you cannot get around. And if you're a pedestrian and you encounter this, think about if you were in a wheelchair or if you had a stroller and you encountered this, it would completely change your ability to get around town. I think the last one that I have a slide on is traffic cameras, or more generally automated traffic enforcement. Last year, the General Assembly at the state level passed a bill that legalized in kind of a constrained form automated traffic enforcement, and that specifically means red light cameras and speed cameras. There's a lot of rules about how they get implemented. In particular, the bill was crafted in response to a lot of concerns about equity. A lot of people had concerns that, for example, if we did this, that we would fall into the same trap as Chicago. Apparently what happened in Chicago is that they tried automated traffic enforcement, and it ended up mostly impacting low-income people, people of color, who didn't have any transportation besides their cars. Their cars got taken away, and it was a mess. So the bill's been crafted specifically to avoid outcomes like that. And so as a result, there's limitations on how much each ticket can be and where the tickets or where the cameras can be placed. The plan for camera placement has to be reviewed by CONDOT. Anyway, I and a couple other people from Sustainable Streets have read the bill and read the guide that was just released last month by CONDOT. The summary is that we have at least a handful of places in Norwalk where we believe that under the current language of the bill, CONDOT would approve us putting automated enforcement. Obviously, again, this is a public conversation that needs to be had. It shouldn't be implemented just based on the recommendation from us. But the first thing that needs to happen in the process is that the council has to pass an ordinance allowing the use of automated traffic enforcement in Norwalk. So that is actionable by the council. Of course, that would be done in conjunction with this larger public conversation that the police department would have to be involved in and the traffic authority would have to be involved in. Another reason to make sure that we have representation on the traffic authority. But yeah, it's got to, in order for everything else to happen, there has to be an ordinance from the council. So other policy, oh, go ahead.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Do you mind if we hold questions to the end? I've got like a one slide left.
Okay, go ahead.
But I am excited to answer questions about it. We've got, we would like to see more green infrastructure, and specifically what we mean by that is things like permeable parking lots in places where we need a parking lot, and then more green space like parks in flood prone areas. I think that conversations have started about that, but I don't think that there's been any policy that's been enacted along that line. This one is not strictly related to the experience of transportation, but rather the experience of people who live around a railroad crossing. If you don't live in the Wall Street area, you may not know that every time the Danbury Line train goes through Wall Street, it has to, by federal law, it has to sound its horn, even if it's at like 11 p.m. And we have members that live in that area, and one of them in particular is so done with this and is ready to go on a crusade to get the area designated as a quiet zone by the Federal Railroad Administration. It's something that can be done. In fact, there's a study in progress right now by WestCog to do the same thing on the New Canaan branch that runs through Stamford and New Canaan. But basically, you have to improve the crossing guard infrastructure to make it more certain that people won't accidentally drive through the railroad crossing when a train's coming. And once you do that, you can get it approved as a quiet zone, and then the train doesn't have to blare its horn at 11 p.m. on its way through Wall Street. So we would love to see that. We're still a little bit hazier on this about what exactly the first like policy action would need to be. It seems like we could probably follow the lead of what WestCog is doing in Stamford and New Canaan and have them just do, copy paste on the Danbury branch. But I'm open. I would love to talk to more people who want to work on that with us. Most of the things we've discussed need to go through TMP in some degree. And in my work with TMP, mostly on behalf of the Bike Walk Commission, I have seen that TMP is doing a ton of work. And one of the biggest constraints on doing more of the work that we see as necessary is more bandwidth in TMP. Obviously, that would be an operations budget issue. And I think that ship has just barely already sailed for this year. But in the long term, we'd love to see TMP have more bandwidth to take on more projects. And then this last one is a conversation that I've had with Councilmember Goldstein. In other cities, especially bigger cities, there is a law that requires construction projects that would temporarily block the sidewalk or the bike lane to come up with an alternative route, even if it potentially removes a lane of car traffic. We'd love to see such a law in the books in Norwalk. But we, of course, would want to work together to figure out exactly what it would look like. So I think these are slides that I threw away earlier. So that's the entirety of my presentation. Thank you for listening. Councilmember Dunn, I would love to answer your question about automated traffic enforcement.
I had a quick question. So it seems like in Norwalk, a lot of the streets that could probably use that or crossings are state-owned.
Yes.
Is your idea that these are all put on city-owned streets? And if you put them on state-owned streets, who gets the money from the infractions and who makes the decisions on how much they cost? That was my question.
That's an excellent question. I don't know the answer. Although what I do know is that when we did our little back of the napkin analysis, we did find at least one, I want to say two intersections that were on city streets, but most of them were on state roads, specifically Connecticut Ave. I think the lion's share were on Connecticut Ave. I don't remember reading anything that says that, like, if it's on a state road that ConnDOT gets a slice of the money. I think I may be mistaken, but if I recall correctly, the limitation is just that ConnDOT would need to be more involved in the decision about the placement if it's on a state road.
I know that they oversee or control the timing of the lights. I think they control the lights. I
I
know
believe that's true.
I'm on the Route 7 Merit Interchange Committee, and they're putting lights in the Super 7,
Yes.
area too. And we were talking about cameras, and I can't remember what they were saying about putting them in there. That's-
If I may, Councilmember Dunn, yeah, I think if it is on a state road, I think the proceeds of the infractions do go to the state. From what I think, and I'm just thinking, that's my inclination, is that I think it would probably go to, so these would have to be placed, hypothetically speaking, on city roads. I think the the revenue that generates would definitely go to content. I think, that's something that we should definitely look into, but yeah.
Ordinance would be a state regulation thing, yes or no? I don't know.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
So it wouldn't require a city ordinance to put cameras on lights that are, you know, like on Main Avenue or Route
I think it
1.
would. I think in order to have any traffic enforcement, any automated traffic enforcement within the city limits of Norwalk, you would have to have a city ordinance. But it sounds like there's some interest here, so I'm happy to go read in more detail and figure out the answer to these questions and work with you all on it.
Yeah, I would just note that these guidelines were released about a month ago.
Yeah,
As
brand
it
new.
says on Tanner's slide. I think I haven't read the actual legislation yet, but I know Tanner, you and I talked about this once, and I've read the guidelines, I mean, not recently, but I'm pretty sure that for any traffic infraction, revenue does go to the municipality. I think the state helps. I am not exactly sure if what Johan just said is right. But I'm doing back of the hand math, so I could be wrong,
So the,
but I don't think it's that clear cut.
so like the cost of mailing out the infraction, the picture of your license plate or whatever is on the state or the city, if it's a state road, would be another question I would have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a great
I'd
question.
be happy to look into it, and I'll get back to you with an answer.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that'd be great, Tanner. Thank you so much. Anyone else on the committee has any more questions? Nope. Okay. Well, Tanner, thank you so much. Thank the Civil Suits for your passion, your efforts, and your time, for everything that you guys do. You guys are very passionate. So I definitely we're definitely thankful of the amount of work you guys put into everything that you guys do. And for this presentation, that's super informative. As you can see, there are some interests in a couple of these items. So I think that for further discussion, there will be further discussion on some of these things in the near future. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. If I can quick put in a plug for our upcoming events. I don't have a slide about it, but specifically for Complete Streets, we have a book club that we're doing to bring people up to speed on the rationale for Complete Streets and the best practices. Our first one is on February 25th. We're reading selected chapters from Walkable City. More information is on our Instagram at Norwalk Streets. We're going to be holding a book club in March and April as well, with 2 other book selections from them. We're also doing a field trip to Hoboken on March 9th. And Johan, I think that you said you're coming, right?
It depends. If it was last week, Johan, that might be a little different than this week's Johan. But
you're all
yes,
invited to
yeah,
join.
yes. Okay.
We're gonna go
yes.
take a look at Hoboken. They are renowned around the nation for having some of the best street safety outcomes because of investments that they've made over the last 5 to 10 years, and we're going to take a look at them in person.
For sure. Awesome. Yes.
Okay,
Cool.
thank you very much.
so much. And thank you so much. Great. So that concludes our presentation by Simple Streets. And moving on to the next item is an update by the Director of the Redevelopment Agency, Mr. Bedoli.
That's me. How you doing?
Hey, Brent, how's it going?
Good, good. Nice to see you all. I'll be pretty quick tonight. This is just kind of a very general update. Just letting you know, I know we've been working to deliver the sustainability and resilience plan to you all. That's in its final stages. We've been going back and forth with the consultant, just to make sure it's, locked up to where we want it before we present it to you, which we plan to do at the next meeting on March 13th. One thing that we did add in the interim here, and some of you may be aware, we had a number of smart city workshops, digital city workshops that I know the chairman attended, as well as Lisa and others, that we wanted to kind of fold in a little bit into this plan. Although it wasn't scoped originally, there's a lot of opportunities for using technology to improve the sustainability of Norwalk. And we just wanted to make sure it was in there by reference, because as you know, the plan that we're pulling together is really kind of just to provide a roadmap to the city as they develop their sustainability initiatives, both in terms of the internal capacity for implementing a lot of the projects that are already on the books, and then also identifying gaps and then recommendations from the consultants to help, kind of further the overall goals and make sure we're in line with best practices. So that's going to be, it's more of a teaser trailer today. But yeah, we'll have a full presentation at the next meeting. And if anything comes up in between now and then, just feel free to reach out to me. And if you have any questions tonight, I'm here.
Sounds good. Quick question before I open up the floor for everyone else. Brian, just going back to we had a speaker earlier that called and asked about the possibility of having residents with some type of experience in space be part of the design process of the actual plan. What can you say to that? What in terms of participation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, looking at the draft plan, I mean, this is a big first step, and I think there's a lot of more engagement that's going to be to come. And that's one of the key recommendations that's in the draft plan as it stands, is to look for additional opportunities for community engagement as you approach each individual task. And it'll make more sense when I kind of we present everything at the next meeting. But again, this is sort of the comprehensive overview of taking the universe of things that have been identified in the past, putting some things together, in terms of gaps that the consultants have identified for projects in the future. And some of those are new plans, some of those are new public engagement, strategies and different things that are still to come. So there's gonna be plenty of time and plenty of opportunities for future engagement. And I can't say, I did hear the comments at the beginning. Be Green, I worked in Bridgeport at the time when Be Green 2030 was, just starting and it was alive and well. So we actually did use that as a reference document as we put this together, just for reference.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Anyone else on the committee has any questions for Mr. Badoli?
Well, we should also say,
Council-
Brian, that we had a lot of public engagement when we originally did the program, because when we did the climate action plan, it was based upon a gathering of lots of stakeholders in the town of Norwalk to do it. So it hasn't been ignored even going into the plan. I mean, that's the basis for our RFP.
Yeah, and like you're just mentioning, I mean, even all the plans that we pulled together were full of robust public engagement. So we took all that, synthesized that into this report. And again, it's really is positioned as a sustainability and resilience plan. There's a GHG component. We actually did a GHG analysis to kind of establish a baseline of where we're at. And then it's going to be up to this group to kind of take that with whatever internal capacity is allocated to the city to define some additional goals, to figure out how you want to take the next steps, because it's all going to be laid out there in terms of the universe of options that'll be important for you to pick up as a group moving forward.
Perfect. Thanks. Councilmember Dunn, I saw you had your hand up.
So, Brian, I know that the redevelopment agency in the past, and I'm not sure right now, had oversight of very specific areas of Norwalk and not the entirety. Is this plan going to encompass all of Norwalk or just the redevelopment areas that redevelopment agencies oversees?
Yeah, it was a citywide plan, so we were just kind of quarterbacking it for the city, and hopefully going to be passing it over to the administration to kind of figure out and help navigate that with you all. But yeah, we are the urban core. We work in the urban core, but this was a citywide plan.
Perfect. Thanks, Brian. Anybody else with any questions or comments or concerns? Yes, no, going once, going twice. No? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Badoli, for taking the time to come and provide us with a quick update. So we look forward to, as we make progress on the plan. So thank you very much.
All right, take care.
Okay, so I think that is it. This ends tonight's first meeting of the Ad Hoc Sustainability Resilience Committee. I think it went fairly well, and I'm excited. And so can I get a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Councilmember Goldstein. All in favor? Okay, am I supposed to raise my hand as well or no?
Sure, why not?
If you would like to adjourn, you may.
No, I'll just stay here by myself. I'll just stay here alone. All right, thank you so much. Thanks a lot, guys.
Well, you can say,
Good night.
All right,
and
good
say
night.
happy Valentine's Day. to
Oh, happy
everyone.
Valentine's to all the ladies and the fellas too. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Good night.
All right,
Thanks.
good night. Bye.